the loss and focus on the future.
Let's get to our political panel on this Thursday morning. Joining us is the former advisor to Kamala Harris, Mike Nellis, and we have politics editor for the Daily Signal, Bradley Devlin. Gentlemen, to you both, thank you for being here. You know, Vice President Harris spoke to her supporters yesterday. She conceded. Let's take a look at this, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people.
Okay, so this is a question for both of you. What are your biggest takeaways from Harris's speech yesterday? And Mike, let's start with you.
My biggest takeaway is that, Kamala Harris conceded. I think she handled it right. The election was conducted fairly, and it was good to see a candidate not, whine in defeat and continue to do the work. I thought the line where she was saying we're conceding the election, but we're not conceding the fight for our values was strong, and it was good to see her do that. There's a lot of work that continues to go on. Obviously, Democrats are not happy with the outcome on Tuesday. We got shellacked, and I'm the first to tell you that. We've got some work to do as a party, and I think that the speech that Kamala Harris gave on Wednesday, was the right place to start.
Bradley, your sentiments?
Yeah, I think her strongest line, and my mic is correct, it was, we're not conceding this fight. And that makes me question whether or not she has an appetite for 2028. If things go poorly with the economy still continues to underperform under President Trump. Does Vice President Harris make a return in a Democratic primary where I don't think the bench is as strong as Democrats would like to see? Another prominent part when she was talking about the youth, well, Donald Trump actually improved his standing with the youth vote when you're looking at 18 to 29 and 30 to 44. He did much, much better in 2024 than he did in 2020, and that should worry Democrats moving forward because they always say, right on the horizon, we are going to have a massive coalition, but it never seems to materialize.
Both President-elect Donald Trump and Kamala Harris talked about unity. Considering how divisive this country has been over this election, what is it going to take to truly unify this country? Mike, I'll start with you.
Well, I think the impetus is on Donald Trump now to try to unify the country. And what I would hope that he does is when he gives his inauguration address, as he chooses his cabinet secretaries, as he thinks through the first policies that he wants to enact, he thinks about the things that made a lot of Americans uncomfortable. People were really uncomfortable with his rhetoric. People were really uncomfortable with some of the very extreme policies and the people that he surrounded himself with. He has an opportunity to try to reset that if he wants to. He's had opportunities before, and he hasn't done that. Look, he won this election, I think, because people were frustrated with inflation and high interest rates, and they blame the Democratic Party for that. Fairly or unfairly, we're the party in power. We have to accept that. But Donald Trump has an opportunity to try to bring unity here, but a lot of people may have buyer's remorse in a few months if he decides to go down the same path he did in 2017.
Bradley, your thoughts on that?
I think delivering on the economic issues, as Mike said, is going to be the secret sauce. That's what the Trump coalition actually reveals. There wasn't a big campaign about the First Step Act or criminal justice reform to court these minority voters, young black men and young Latino men in particular. It was delivering on a message of tariffs, of tax cuts, and of protectionism for American industry. So if Trump can deliver on that, lower prices, free up the energy industry, et cetera, then I think you could see a more prosperous American economy and some of those divisions that I think sometimes are rooted in the economic disparities we see in this country. We can see that start to heal. So that's my hope.
Yeah. Well, Donald Trump has been very vocal about putting together a unique team. He talked about not making the same mistake that he made last time. He said last time he was an outsider into Washington, D.C. He had to take a lot of advice in terms of who he picked. He said this time he understands Washington. He says, according to him, better than ever. We're looking at some of his possible cabinet members, everyone from Brooke Rollins, Mike Pompeo, Kellyanne Conway, Vivek Ramaswamy, and you see, of course, we also know Elon Musk is part of that conversation, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard. So it really is a broad coalition of people with different ideas, different backgrounds, and different experiences coming together. What are you looking for as key to this transition period? Both of you can answer that. Bradley, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think some of those names concerned me on that list, particularly Mike Pompeo, who the former president has said a lot of nice things about. I guess the president-elect now has said a lot of nice things about in the final days of the campaign. If Trump wants to deliver on the foreign policy message that he promoted during this campaign, solving the war in Ukraine, wrapping up the war in the Middle East, not going to war with China, he should be very, very wary about who he puts in prominent positions in state, in defense, and also in the intelligence apparatus. I think John Ratcliffe is one of the names not on that list. He's probably going to find himself atop some sort of intelligence agency. And I think transparency and resolve, loyalty to the president's agenda that just received a landslide mandate is paramount.
And Mike?
He's going to need to be really careful to make sure that he picks cabinet appointees that are going to fight for the vast majority of Americans. I apologize for my phone going off there. But, you know, the name on that list that gives me the most pause is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He has some extreme views on health, and I think it would be a huge mistake for him to elevate him into the cabinet. I mean, RFK Jr. is talking about taking fluoride out of water. He's talking about vaccines. He's talking about all kinds of just really extreme stuff. And I think that's the one where I could see the wheels coming off really quickly if he tries to appoint him in the cabinet.
Well, all eyes are going to be on this transition period indeed. Gentlemen, thank you both for your perspectives. Great conversation, as always.
Thank you. Well, former Trump advisor